Ever wonder what it really felt like to wake up in a world where survival itself was a daily gamble? Where your breakfast might make you sick, your neighbors might burn you for gossip, and even sleep wasn't safe from rats or worse. Tonight, we're stepping straight into that brutal, beautiful mess called the Middle Ages. Hey guys, tonight we're taking a slow walk back into a time you probably wouldn't last a day in the medieval world. Imagine waking before dawn in a wooden shack, breath misting in the air, every sound amplified by the silence of survival. The world outside your door isn't just cold. It's filthy, loud, and constantly on the edge of sickness or starvation. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop a comment with where you're watching from and what time it is for you right now. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake up on a rough straw mattress, the kind that scratches your skin and smells faintly of mildew and smoke. Your blanket is made from coarse wool, scratchy, heavy, and barely warm. You can hear the faint groans of the wooden beams above, and outside, the distant clatter of carts already rolling through muddy streets. A rooster crows somewhere, though you're not sure if that means dawn or just another sleepless peasant's alarm clock. The air is thick with the odor of unwashed bodies, damp earth, and the faint tang of chamber pots emptied too close to the door. You stretch, feeling the ache in your shoulders. It's not soreness from last night's workout, it's the daily strain of living. The medieval body was a tool, not a temple. You sleep beside your family, sometimes your livestock, all sharing body heat to survive the cold months. Privacy isn't a concept yet. In fact, historians still argue whether the medieval idea of self even existed, whether people saw themselves as individuals at all, or just as part of a small, grinding collective. When you step outside, the morning greets you not with birdsong but with a sour mix of smoke, dung, and wet hay. The street is alive. Not in the cheerful, bustling sense, but quite literally alive with vermin. Rats skitter between stones, pigs root through garbage heaps, and the stray dog that trots by is probably more reliable than half your neighbors. You nod to the baker trudging past, his face blackened with soot. His bread will be hard as stone by noon, but it's still safer than the water. You trudge toward the communal well, bucket in hand. The wood creaks under the strain of the rope, and when the water rises, it's cloudy and greenish. You tell yourself it'll settle. It never really does. One sip too many of the wrong thing, and you're bedridden for a week. That's why most people drink ale, even for breakfast, weak beer that's safer than the water because boiling kills most of what's trying to kill you. Ironically, being a little buzzed might actually make medieval mornings bearable. As you walk back, you pass a group of women beating laundry by the stream, their hands red from the cold. One of them tells a joke about how her husband smells worse than the pigs, and everyone laughs, maybe a little too hard. Humor, after all, is one of the few things that doesn't rot. The village priest passes by, eyes scanning everyone with that mix of piety and quiet suspicion. The church knows everything, or at least it wants to, and in this world, that's nearly the same thing. You think about washing, but that's a rich person's hobby. A full bath is something you might do a few times a year if you're lucky. Maybe at midsummer, when the streams are warm and your neighbors are feeling charitable enough not to judge the smell. Medieval people weren't entirely ignorant of cleanliness. They just lived in a constant balance between what was possible and what was practical. Too much bathing, some said, made you weak, even sinful. It's strange how moral purity was considered more important than physical purity, though if you've ever smelled a medieval street, you'd know both were in short supply. Inside your hut, the hearth is barely smoking. You toss in a few damp twigs and coax the fire to life. The smoke curls up into the rafters, where soot stains everything black. Your ceiling is basically a lung, slowly choking on its own air. You stir the last bit of last night's porridge, thick, gray, and more like glue than food. You eat it anyway. Hunger doesn't argue. A chicken pecks at the doorway, and you shoo it away half-heartedly. It'll be tonight's dinner, maybe tomorrow's, assuming it doesn't escape first. You hear your neighbor shouting at his mule, followed by a slap and a curse. Violence isn't shocking here, it's punctuation. is how people talk to the world when words don't help. The first bell from the distant church tower tolls. A dull, echoing reminder that time itself belongs to someone else. You can't afford a clock, and even if you could, what would be the point? The rhythm of your life is set by seasons, sunlight, and obligation. Historians still debate whether people in the Middle Ages even thought about time the way we do, whether they lived in a present so immediate that the future barely existed beyond the next harvest or the next prayer. You scratch your arm and notice a small sore that hasn't healed. Infection, in this world, is a coin toss with death. You think about the local healer, a woman who smells like herbs and suspicion. She might help you, or she might be accused of witchcraft next month. Either way, you can't afford her. So, you spit on the wound, wrap it in cloth, and hope the saints are in a generous mood today. The sun creeps higher, casting a pale, golden light through the mist. It looks beautiful, almost holy if you squint. A world painted in smoke and dew. You pause for a second, leaning on your bucket, and for that brief moment it feels peaceful. Despite everything, there's still beauty here. The clatter of wooden wheels, the laughter of children chasing a stick, the creak of a door. It's all strangely alive. Brutal, yes, but alive. You glance toward the castle rising in the distance, its walls catching the morning light. That's where power sleeps, behind stone and steel, far from the stench and struggle of your world. But that's not your concern yet. For now, you've survived another night, and that's enough to count as victory. You take a slow breath, feeling the chill of the dawn slide down your throat. This is life. Hard, dirty, uncertain, and you're right in the middle of it. Tomorrow will bring work, hunger, and maybe a sermon about obedience. But for now, you have warmth, however fragile. And in the soft crackle of the fire, you can almost believe that this morning, at least, belongs to you. You stare at the chunk of bread in your hand, hard, brown, and roughly the size of your fist. It's not exactly breakfast as you know it. It's survival disguised as food. The crust is tough enough to chip a tooth, and the inside tastes faintly of smoke and grit. You dip it into your cup of small ale, watery beer brewed from leftovers, and the bread softens just enough to chew without breaking a molar. Congratulations, you've just eaten like a medieval peasant. Breakfast, in this world, isn't a leisurely ritual. There's no coffee, no milk, no eggs sizzling in butter. If you're lucky, you get that crust of bread and maybe a spoon of porridge or leftover stew from last night. The rich fare no better, though in a different way. Their tables are piled high with meats drenched in spices to cover the taste of decay. Historians still argue whether medieval meat was truly rotten or simply aged in ways our modern stomachs can't handle. Either way, your nose would know the difference. You glance toward the manor house on the hill, where smoke from the kitchen chimney curls into the gray morning sky. That's where your lord dines. His bread is white, sifted flour that only the wealthy can afford. Yours is dark, heavy with bran and rye. His table gleams with pewter plates and roast venison. Yours is a rough plank and a wooden bowl. But here's the joke. Nobles often suffered more from indigestion and gout than hunger. You might be poor, but at least you won't die from overeating goose fat. The smell of ale fills the room as your wife, or maybe your mother or your friend, depending on who shares your hut, pours another mug. Children sip it too because it's safer than water. It's weak, closer to liquid bread than booze, though after 3 or 4 cups, your cheeks warm and the world feels slightly softer. The drink dulls the hunger that never quite leaves. You can almost believe you're full. Outside, the sound of clanging pots echoes down the muddy street. The baker's boy is shouting about fresh loaves, though fresh is a generous term. You can trade a handful of beans or a few onions for one, maybe 2. You sling your cloak around your shoulders and head out, stepping carefully over puddles that gleam with things best left unmentioned. A cart rumbles past, its wheels caked in muck. You recognize the smell of manure mixed with rot. It's the scent of your entire life, earthy, stubborn, and impossible to wash away. You reach the baker's stall. His face is slick with sweat despite the cold, his oven blazing behind him. He hands you a loaf, dark, uneven, and steaming. The crust cracks under your fingers, and for a brief moment, it feels like luxury. Bread is more than food here. It's survival currency. Ties every class together. Without it, the world stops turning. There's even a superstition that dropping bread is bad luck. A small sin that could anger the saints or, worse, invite famine. You don't take chances. Not in a world where crops fail more often than kings do. Back at your table, you tear the loaf in half and share it with the others. The steam rises, carrying the faint, comforting scent of yeast. You chew slowly, savoring it, the warmth, the weight, the simple fact that it fills your stomach. For a few minutes, life feels manageable. But then you think of those feasts in the manor. Long tables groaning under plates of roasted boar, spiced wine, and candied fruit. You've never tasted half those things, but you've smelled them drifting downwind when the wind is cruel. At night, you sometimes hear laughter from the banquet hall. A deep, rolling sound that makes you clench your fists under the blanket. They say the nobles dine on peacocks and swans, though historians still debate whether those stories were real or exaggerated moral lessons about vanity. Either way, the peasants' world and the nobles' world might as well be separate planets. The irony, though, is that both suffer from the same invisible enemy, food poisoning. Without refrigeration, leftovers are a gamble. You might have a feast today and a funeral tomorrow. Nobles drown their meals in vinegar and salt, believing it masks the rot. Peasants scorch their stew over smoky fires until it's nearly black. You cough, taste the bitterness, and tell yourself it's fine. Everyone does. There's a certain hierarchy even in what's unappetizing. The poorest scrape lichen from bread, while merchants eat thin soups with a hint of meat. Monks grow their own vegetables, bless every bite, and quietly pray their beans aren't infested. And then there are fasting days nearly half the year by church rule. No meat, no dairy, no eggs. Just fish, if you can find it, or the ever-faithful cabbage stew. It's supposed to cleanse your soul. Mostly, it just makes you lightheaded. One neighbor tells you about a miracle. A fish that appeared in his bucket even though he hadn't been near the river. You nod and smile, but inside, you suspect his cousin dropped it in as a prank. Faith and hunger often look the same from a distance. You chew another bite, jaw aching slightly, and watch a chicken strut across the dirt floor. It clucks loudly, pecks at a crumb near your boot, and you can't help but laugh. There's something absurd about sharing your breakfast with a bird that might become your dinner. Humor here is a thin defense against misery. The midday bell tolls in the distance, though time feels slippery. Maybe it's still morning. The ale has that effect. You step outside and see the miller crossing the bridge, flour dusting his hair white like frost. He's one of the richest men in the village, thanks to his monopoly on grinding grain. Everyone pays him a share, one handful from every sack. It's fair, supposedly, but you've seen him take more than his due. Power hides in the smallest grains of flour. By now, the sun has burned off the mist, and the streets are awake. Women barter over vegetables, men sharpen tools, children chase a hoop made of willow. It's noisy, chaotic, alive. A peddler passes by singing about honey cakes for lovers. Though the cakes look like dry biscuits and cost a week's wage. You watch him disappear down the road, his tune fading, and feel the dull emptiness settle again. Your stomach growls. You're already hungry. That's the cruel rhythm of medieval life. You never feel full, only less empty for a while. Historians often romanticize simple living. But if you could send them back here, you'd bet they'd trade every manuscript for a sandwich. As the day stretches, you start thinking about supper, maybe onions boiled with lentils, maybe just more bread. If you're lucky, someone snared a rabbit. If not, you'll pretend the stew tastes of meat anyway. Hunger makes imagination the best spice. You take one last sip of ale, thick and warm, and wipe your mouth with your sleeve. The taste lingers, bitter but honest. There's a strange comfort in knowing that everyone from beggar to baron starts the day the same way. Hungry, a little drunk, and already tired. You set down the empty cup and glance at the crumbs on the table. This is breakfast. Not indulgence, not pleasure, but endurance. Yet somehow it's enough to keep the world turning, one crust at a time. You step out of your hut again, full enough to work but never quite satisfied. The first thing you feel is the mud sucking at your boots. Thick, sticky, and alive with yesterday's rain, spilled slop, and the steady traffic of bare feet. The dirt beneath you isn't just earth. It's the bloodstream of your village. Everything flows through it: food, waste, death. You can tell what day it is by the smell alone. Streets in the Middle Ages aren't really streets. They're more like shared backyards. Narrow, uneven, and so packed with filth that even the rats sometimes hesitate. You watch a woman toss the contents of her chamber pot out the window, shouting the traditional warning, "Guard low," though you don't speak French, and it wouldn't matter if you did. The splash lands just short of your boots. You sigh. That's your morning blessing. You keep walking. The houses are close enough to touch, leaning slightly, like drunks holding each other up. Timber beams creak with age. Straw roofs sag under years of smoke. You can smell every household's breakfast, their bodies, their lives. The air is a soup of odors: rotting vegetables, burning tallow, dung, fish, wet dog, and the faint sweetness of bread that somehow makes it worse. Historians still argue whether people actually didn't notice the smell, or if they just accepted it as inevitable. Either way, your nose never gets used to it. You dodge a cart rolling past, the driver swearing as one will sinks deep into a puddle. The ox groans and strains, mud splattering up your leg. You wipe it off without thinking. Dirt is constant, a companion you stop fighting after a while. It fills your fingernails, coats your clothes, and sticks to your skin like an extra layer. You'll go to bed tonight still wearing it. At the corner, a beggar sits with a wooden bowl, his hands trembling. You drop a crumb of bread inside. Not because you can spare it, but because you understand. He thanks you in a rasping voice, eyes milky with age. The smell hits first. Old wounds that never healed. Fabric that hasn't been washed in years. You feel a pang of guilt as you walk on. Charity is a virtue, but so is survival, and in this world, the two don't always agree. A group of children run past, barefoot and laughing, their laughter bright against the gloom. One of them kicks a ball made from stitched rags. Another trips and falls face first into a puddle. They all laugh harder. For a moment, it's almost easy to forget where you are, until a pig waddles through, snorting, and the children scatter. You watch the pig nose its way into a heap of refuse and sigh. In the Middle Ages, pigs are your garbage collectors, street sweepers, and future dinner, all rolled into one. You glance up the road toward the church tower, its bell marking the hours that no one can quite afford to count. The churchyard lies beside it, half hidden behind a low wall. You can see mounds of freshly turned soil and crosses leaning at odd angles. The dead don't rest long here. Space is too precious. Sometimes the gravedigger reuses a plot before the previous tenant has fully decomposed. It's a practical decision, nothing more. Still, when the wind shifts and you catch the faint whiff of decay, you can't help but shiver. The dirt path takes you past the butcher's stall. If butcher is the right word for a man hacking meat on a slab of wood crawling with flies. His apron is crusted with blood, his hands black with grime. He nods as you pass, cheerful as ever. You don't dare look too closely at what's hanging from the hooks. Whatever it was, it probably had a name yesterday. You pause near a puddle reflecting the sky, a warped mirror of blue and brown. You can almost see your face in it. Tired eyes, cracked lips, a smear of ash on your cheek. You dip your fingers into the water to wipe it off, then think better of it. The water isn't clean. It never is. You can see thin strands of something floating on the surface, shimmering faintly. Maybe it's oil. Maybe it's worse. You rub your hands on your tunic and move on. There's a superstition in your village. Step on a spot where a plague cart once stopped, and you'll fall ill within a week. Of course, no one remembers exactly where those carts went. Still, you find yourself avoiding the darker patches of ground, just in case. Fear has its own logic. A woman passes carrying a bucket of fish, the smell overpowering even the manure. She's heading for the market square, where the day's trading will begin. You follow at a distance, boots squelching in the mud. The square is already alive with noise. Traders shouting, chickens flapping, dogs barking. It's chaos in every direction. Yet somehow it works. This is the heartbeat of medieval life. Loud, filthy, and stubbornly human. You see a man sweeping the front of his shop, a broom made of twigs scraping over stones. The dust rises and settles again, accomplishing nothing. Still, it's a gesture, a way of pretending control over the uncontrollable. You nod to him, and he grins, showing a mouth full of missing teeth. "Good day, friend," he says. You nod back, though good is a generous word. A cart overturns nearby, spilling onions across the ground. Instantly, half a dozen people rush to grab them. You're tempted to join, but you hold back. The air fills with shouting, laughter, and a few punches thrown. By the time it's over, the onions are gone, and so is the cart driver's patience. You can't help but chuckle. In this place, even chaos has its rituals. As you head home, you notice the ditch that runs along the edge of the street. It's supposed to carry waste away from the houses, but it's clogged, stagnant water bubbling quietly. You try not to think about where it goes after it leaves the village. Maybe into the river, maybe nowhere at all. Children play nearby, tossing pebbles into the murky water, each splash releasing another puff of smell. You pass a man spreading straw across the street, not out of kindness, but to soak up the filth before the next rain washes it downhill. It's strange, you think, how life here depends entirely on managing decay. Everything rots, everything returns to dirt, and somehow you keep going anyway. You pause near your door, boots caked in mud. You scrape them against the threshold, though it barely helps. The dirt always wins. It seeps into everything, your walls, your food, your lungs. You take a deep breath, the scent of smoke and earth filling your chest. And yet, there's something grounding about it. You belong to this mud as much as it belongs to you. Inside, the fire still burns low. You sit down, wipe your hands, and stare at the flickering light. Outside, the street hums on loud, filthy, alive. It's easy to call it brutal, and it is, but it's also home. And in a world where the line between filth and life is so thin, you've learned to find a kind of peace in the dirt beneath your feet. You finish scraping the mud from your boots and glance toward the horizon. The sky is pale and washed out, the color of cold milk. That means one thing: work. The kind that doesn't end, doesn't reward, and doesn't care if you're tired or sick. In the medieval world, the rhythm of your day isn't your own. From sunrise to sunset, your body belongs to someone richer, and your soul belongs to the church. You grab your wooden rake and start toward the fields. The morning air is heavy with mist and the smell of wet hay. You can hear the distant clank of tools, the creak of cart wheels, the low murmur of voices already working. The earth under your feet is slick and dark, still soaked from last night's rain. You sigh. It'll be a long day, and you already know how it will end. With sore hands, aching shoulders, and a belly only half full. The lord of your manor owns everything you see. The fields, the livestock, even the woods where you sometimes sneak to gather firewood. You don't get paid for your labor. Instead, you're allowed to live on a small patch of his land and keep a fraction of what you grow. Historians still argue whether that makes you a tenant or just a better-fed slave. Either way, it's not freedom. You pass the boundary stone marked with your lord's crest, carved deep into the rock. It's both a symbol and a warning. Cross it without permission, and you're trespassing. You remember the story of the man who once cut wood beyond this point. The reeve caught him and took his oxen as punishment. The man wept, not for the animals, but for his children. Without the oxen, he couldn't plow. Without plowing, he couldn't eat. Justice here isn't blind. It's very well fed. By the time you reach the fields, your breath comes in steady clouds. You push the rake into the soil, feeling the resistance, thick and stubborn. Your fingers blister quickly, though you barely notice anymore. The rhythm of the work becomes a kind of meditation. Dig, lift, turn, breathe. You lose track of time. The world narrows to the sound of your own effort, the scrape of metal, the soft grunt of your neighbor working beside you. He tells you about a rumor that a nearby lord is offering better land to anyone who'll move to his village. You laugh quietly. It's a nice story, but you've heard it before. No one leaves unless they're desperate or dying. Roads are dangerous, and strangers are suspicious. You're born here, you work here, you die here, he mutters. He's not bitter. It's just a fact. like the weather or taxes. Around midday, the Reeve rides by on horseback, checking everyone's progress. His boots shine, his cloak is dry, and his eyes are cold. He doesn't shout, doesn't threaten, he doesn't need to. His presence alone is enough to make you straighten your back and dig faster. You can feel his gaze linger on your row of turned earth. Too shallow, maybe. You fix it before he circles back. When he's gone, you allow yourself to stand for a moment. The sun's higher now, though it gives more glare than warmth. You wipe sweat from your brow, the salt stinging your eyes. Somewhere behind you, a woman hums a tune as she gathers herbs along the edge of the field. Soft, wordless, but steady. The sound drifts through the air like smoke. It makes the day feel almost bearable. Lunch, if you can call it that, is a piece of bread wrapped in cloth and a small hunk of cheese that's gone slightly sour. You eat sitting on a stone, dirt on your hands, wind in your face. It's not much, but you eat every bite. Nothing goes to waste here. A crumb dropped is a prayer lost. As you chew, you watch a group of children chasing a bird through the furrows. They laugh, tripping over their bare feet, their hair full of straw. Childhood doesn't last long in this world. By the time they're 12, they'll be out here with you, swinging tools heavier than they are. For now, though, their laughter feels like sunlight. You smile despite yourself. By mid-afternoon, the wind shifts, carrying the distant toll of the church bell. 1, 2, 3, a reminder to pray. You set down your rake and bow your head. Everyone does. It's not faith so much as habit. You whisper a short prayer, not for salvation, but for strength to finish the day without collapsing. Religion here isn't just belief. It's a way to survive the unbearable by pretending it's meaningful. The work resumes, slower now. Your hands throb, and your back screams with every bend. You hum that same tune the herb gatherer sang earlier, half to distract yourself, half to keep time. The soil gives little reward. Last year's harvest was thin, and this one doesn't look much better. Historians still debate whether medieval peasants were malnourished, but you don't need a historian to tell you what hunger feels like. Toward evening, the sky deepens into amber. The air cools, heavy with the smell of sweat and grass. You straighten your spine, muscles trembling. Around you, people pack up their tools, wiping mud from their hands. There's no applause, no relief, just exhaustion. Yet, as you stand there, gazing across the wide brown field, you can't help but feel something close to pride. You may not own this land, but your sweat has soaked every inch of it. It remembers you. The Reeve returns, counting sacks of grain and nodding silently. When he's satisfied, you're dismissed. The walk home feels longer than the walk out. Each step squelches through the same mud, but now it's mixed with the faint satisfaction of survival. You didn't starve today. You didn't get whipped. You didn't collapse. That counts as victory. As you approach the village, the air fills with familiar sounds. Chickens clucking, a dog barking, someone arguing over a missing loaf. The smoke from a dozen hearths curls into the dusk like ribbons. You can smell onions frying somewhere. That smell is as close to comfort as you'll get tonight. You reach your door, lean your rake against the wall, and stretch your aching arms. Inside, the fire crackles weakly. You sit, feeling the stiffness in your knees, and for a moment the silence feels heavy. You think about your life, about how every sunrise brings the same work, the same dirt, the same ache. And yet, somehow, you keep going. Maybe it's duty, maybe it's fear, or maybe it's the quiet, stubborn hope that someday your children might live a little better. You glance out the window, watching the last light fade from the sky. The fields lie dark and still now, the air cool against your skin. You close your eyes and whisper a short prayer. Not for heaven, but simply for another morning. Night has fallen over the village, and the world is reduced to the glow of your hearth and the sigh of wind against the walls. Outside, everything is swallowed by darkness. Not the comfortable kind we know today, softened by streetlights or the faint hum of a city. This darkness is complete, ancient, alive. It presses against your window like something that wants to come in. You sit close to the fire, the only light in your small hut. Its orange glow dances across the uneven wooden beams, the flicker shaping shadows that look almost human. Your wife hums softly as she mends a torn sleeve. The thread catches the firelight, glinting gold for an instant before vanishing again. The children are already asleep, huddled together under a wool blanket that smells faintly of smoke. You envy them. The day's labor has left your body heavy, but your mind won't rest yet. There's always one more task. Patching tools, sharpening blades, checking the traps set near the woods. Each small act feels like insurance against a cruel world. A world where a broken plow or a spoiled loaf could mean disaster. You've seen it happen to others. The slow unraveling of fortune that ends in hunger and hollow cheeks. The fire pops. A log shifts. The room smells of pine, resin, and sweat. You stretch your hands toward the warmth, feeling the rough calluses catch the light. They tell your story better than any book could. These hands have planted and harvested, bled and healed, worked through rain and frost. They've never held a coin worth boasting about, yet they've kept your family alive. That's something no title or banner can buy. There's a knock at the door, soft, hesitant. You frown. Visitors at this hour are rare. When you open it, a thin gust of cold air slips inside, followed by a neighbor, Thomas. His face is tight, eyes darting. "A cow's gone missing," he whispers. "From the Abbey's pasture." You blink, unsure how to respond. That's bad news. Very bad. The Abbey's animals are sacred property, and anyone accused of theft could be flogged, or worse. "I heard the Reeves looking for someone to blame," Thomas adds, glancing nervously toward the fields. His breath steams in the chill. He says tracks lead toward our side of the stream. You feel your stomach tighten. You've never stolen anything, not even wood without permission. But the truth doesn't matter much in these parts. Justice isn't about guilt. It's about convenience. You light a small tallow candle and step outside with him. The village lies silent except for the soft bleating of distant sheep and the occasional bark of a dog. The moon is thin tonight, more shadow than light. Together you walk toward the stream, boots crunching on frost-hardened ground. Near the water you see the tracks Thomas mentioned, deep, uneven prints already blurring under the dew. They could belong to anyone, but that won't stop the Reeve. He needs someone to punish to keep order. Fear is the glue that holds this fragile world together. Thomas mutters a prayer. You join him quietly. The two of you stand there, breathing in the cold, waiting for a sign. None comes. Finally, you turn back toward the village. There's nothing to do but hope the Reeve finds another scapegoat before dawn. Back inside, the fire has burned low. Your wife looks up from her sewing, reading the worry on your face without a word. She adds another log to the flames, the sparks bursting upward like fireflies. "Sleep," she says softly. "You'll need your strength tomorrow." You lie down beside her on the straw mattress. The roof creaks as the wind passes over. Somewhere beyond the walls, a night owl calls. A long, low note that sounds almost like mourning. You pull the blanket closer and close your eyes. But sleep doesn't come easily. Instead, you drift in and out of half-dreams. A cow's lowing, the Reeve's hard eyes, the sound of hooves in mud. You remember stories of men dragged from their beds for less. Guilt, innocence, they blur in the dark. What matters is survival. You promise yourself that if the Reeve comes tomorrow, you'll keep your head down and your answers short. At some point, exhaustion wins. The world fades to black, and your last thought before sinking into sleep is a simple prayer. Let the morning come without trouble. It does, but the trouble arrives not long after. The rooster crows, dragging you from your dreams. You rise, bones stiff, the air so cold your breath hangs like smoke. The door rattles before you even reach it. When you open it, the Reeve stands there, flanked by two men. His expression is unreadable. "There's been a theft," he says. "The abbot demands restitution. We'll be searching every house." You step aside without protest. The men move through your home like wolves, turning over baskets, lifting straw, prodding corners with the ends of their spears. You watch in silence, every muscle tense. The children stare wide-eyed from their bedding. After what feels like an eternity, they leave, finding nothing. The Reeve pauses in the doorway, "If you hear anything," he says, "tell me before I have to find it myself." You nod, though your jaw aches from clenching it. When they're gone, the silence feels heavier than before. Your wife exhales slowly. "They'll blame someone," she says. You both know she's right. Someone always gets blamed. Maybe Thomas. Maybe you next time. Justice isn't blind here. It just looks the other way for the right people. You step outside again, letting the cold slap you awake. The sun is only a suggestion on the horizon, a faint smear of light. The fields wait indifferent. Somewhere, a church bell tolls for morning mass. You start walking because that's what you do. No matter what happens, you keep working. As you move through the mist, you think about the reeve, about the abbey, about how a missing cow can shake an entire village. You realize something both bleak and strangely comforting. In this world, power is fragile too. Lords fall sick, abbots die, reeves grow old. The wheel keeps turning. You might never climb it, but you've learned how to endure beneath it. By midday, the theft is all anyone can talk about. Rumors twist like smoke. Some say bandits did it, others blame hungry villagers from the next town. You keep your head down and work. The soil doesn't care who's guilty. It just waits to be turned. When the sun sets again, you return home, body sore but heart strangely calm. You survived another day. The cow is still missing, the reeve still angry, but none of it changes the rhythm that keeps you alive. Work, eat, pray, sleep. It's not freedom, but it's a kind of peace. That night, as you sit by the fire once more, you notice something small but beautiful. Your daughter tracing shapes in the ash with a stick, whispering stories she's made up herself. You watch her, and for the first time in days you smile. Maybe that's how people like you fight back. Not with rebellion, but with imagination. The fire crackles softly, and outside, the wind carries the faint promise of snow. You close your eyes and let the warmth sink into your bones. Tomorrow will come as it always does, and when it does, you'll wake, work, and endure. One more day in a world that barely notices, yet somehow always continues. The morning starts with an eerie quiet. Even the chickens outside seem reluctant to make noise, as if they, too, sense the tension crawling through the air. You rise to the faint chill that seeps through every crack in the timber walls. Your wife says nothing as she hands you a cup of watered-down ale, the breakfast of the poor and the cautious. The children still sleep. You envy them again. You step outside, expecting the usual smell of wood smoke and manure. But today there's something else on the wind. Something metallic, sour, unsettling. Takes a few heartbeats to realize what it is. Death. First, it's just a whisper. Someone says a beggar died near the village gate. His skin darkened with strange swellings. Another says 2 bodies were found in the next hamlet. Faces black, mouths frozen in screams. You try to ignore it. You've heard such rumors before, wolves, witches, curses. But as the day goes on, more voices join the chorus. By noon, the priest has rung the church bell not once, but 3 times. The sound echoes across the fields, low, trembling, and wrong. You wipe your hands on your tunic and glance toward the bell tower. A small crowd has gathered outside, their faces pale. The reeve is there, shouting for calm, but no one's listening. Someone mutters the word plague. It moves through the crowd like a cold wind. You feel it, too. That creeping dread that starts in your stomach and climbs higher, settling behind your ribs like ice. You've heard stories, of course. Everyone has. Tales passed down since your grandfather's time, of a sickness that sweeps through villages like a scythe, leaving no one behind. People speak of the Black Death in hushed tones, as if the name itself might summon it. But that was long ago. Surely it can't be happening again. Can it? By evening, there's no denying it. The beggar's body lies just outside the churchyard. A few brave souls standing at a distance. No one dares to touch him. His skin is blotched purple and black, the stench unbearable even from where you stand. His hand still clutches a wooden cross, as if faith alone could save him. The priest steps forward, holding a censer, swinging it gently as incense curls through the air. His voice trembles as he prays. Behind him, the villagers whisper. Theories, accusations, desperate hopes. God is punishing us, someone says. It's the foreigners, says another. No, mutters an old woman, clutching her shawl. It's the stars. They've shifted. The air's gone bad. Historians still argue whether people truly believed such things or simply needed someone to blame. But for you, standing there, breathing in the fear, the truth doesn't matter. What matters is survival. The Reeve orders the body buried at once, but no one volunteers. Finally, 2 men from the church step forward, their faces pale beneath their hoods. They wrap the corpse in an old blanket and drag it away, trying not to touch the skin. You can hear the muffled thud of the shovel hitting frozen earth long after they disappear behind the hill. That night, you can't sleep. You lie awake listening to the wind rattle the shutters. Every cough, every creak of wood feels like a warning. You try to pray, but the words catch in your throat. You think of your children, of their small hands and their laughter, and the thought of them falling ill-twists your stomach. Days pass. The air grows heavier. The smell of burning herbs fills the streets. The priest walks door to door, sprinkling holy water, muttering blessings. The wealthier families hang garlic and rosemary in their windows. You do the same, though deep down you know it's useless. Then, one morning, Thomas's wife collapses in the field. You hear her scream before you see her, a sound so raw it cuts through the fog. You and Thomas rush to her side. Her face is flushed red, her breathing shallow. There's a swelling on her neck the size of a plum. Thomas looks at you, eyes wide with terror. "What do I do?" he whispers. You have no answer. That night, she's dead. The next morning, Thomas himself is feverish. By sunset, the Reeve orders his house sealed. The panic spreads faster than the sickness. People stop talking to one another, stop touching, stop sharing food. The market stands empty. The church bell tolls so often you start to hate the sound of it. Each ring means another neighbor gone. You begin to notice how still the world has become. No laughter from the children, no gossip from the women at the well. Just silence and the distant toll of death. You spend your days chopping wood. Not because you need it, but because the rhythm keeps your thoughts at bay. Chop, breathe, swing. Chop, breathe, swing. At night, smoke rises from the hills, funeral pyres. The smell of it drifts for miles, thick and cloying. You wonder if the smoke carries the sickness, if you should shut your windows. But the heat is unbearable inside, and the air tastes stale. Then one morning, as you fetch water from the well, you see something that makes your heart stop. A procession, 6 men in long black robes, faces hidden behind white-beaked masks. The plague doctors. You've heard of them, though you've never seen one up close. They move like ghosts, the beaks filled with herbs, the robes stiff with wax. One of them stops near you. He doesn't speak, only gestures toward the next house. You realize it's where the baker's family lives. He enters without hesitation. Moments later, a scream bursts out, then silence. You feel your knees weaken. The doctor emerges again, shaking his head. The baker's wife follows, crying quietly. You turn away, unable to watch. Your hands tremble as you lift the bucket from the well. The rope creaks, the water splashes, and you think, absurdly, how beautiful the ripples look in the morning light. You carry the water home. Inside, your wife meets your eyes. Neither of you speaks. You both know the same thing. The plague is here, and all you can do is wait. That night, you light the candle at your bedside and watch the flames sway. You think of the stories your grandmother told, how some prayed and lived, others hid and still died. Historians still argue whether prayer helped or luck or nothing at all. But as the wind hums through the cracks in the wall, you decide you'll do both. Pray and hide. Days turn into weeks. The plague burns through your village like fire through dry grass. Houses are boarded shut. Dogs roam freely, desperate for food. The Reeve is gone, vanished one night, perhaps fleeing, perhaps taken. Even the priest stops ringing the bell. The silence that follows feels endless. You keep your family inside, rationing what little food you have left. Sometimes, you hear footsteps outside, a knock that never repeats. You don't open the door. You can't. Then, one morning, the air feels different, cleaner, lighter. You step outside and realize the fires have stopped. The smell of decay is fading. You see a bird land on the fence post, tilting its head at you as if to ask where everyone went. You don't know what to feel. Relief, perhaps, or guilt. You've survived, but half your village hasn't. The fields lie empty, the churchyard swollen with fresh earth. You close your eyes, whisper a prayer, and for the first time in months, you hear something like peace, fragile, uncertain, but real. The smell of smoke lingers long after the worst of it passes. The fields are quiet again, too quiet. You walk through what used to be the heart of the village, past shuttered homes and overgrown paths. Every few steps, a crow startles from a roof beam, flapping off into the gray morning. The air is heavy with a strange stillness, as if the world itself is holding its breath. The plague may have faded, but it has left ghosts behind. Ghosts you can't see but always feel. The baker's house stands empty, the door still barred from the night his family fell ill. The sound of your boots on the dirt road seems too loud, too alive. You start avoiding eye contact with the few people you still see. Survival has turned everyone into shadows of themselves. But people can't stop needing things. And when the living are desperate, they turn to anyone who promises help. That's when the healers come back, the ones who claim they can purge the sickness or draw out the evil humors. At first, you want to believe them. You have to, because what else is there? The priest's prayers didn't stop the plague. The Reeves orders didn't protect anyone. Maybe the healers, these wandering doctors with pouches of dried herbs and strange instruments, know something you don't. A man named Master Odo arrives one afternoon, riding a tired mule. He calls himself a physician, though his robes are patched and his eyes dart like a cornered animal's. The villagers gather around him as if he were a saint. He sets up a small table near the well, lays out his tools. Knives, leeches, a brass cup for bleeding. You've never seen such things up close. He clears his throat. Your bodies, he begins, are full of bad humors, blood, phlegm, bile. When they grow unbalanced, sickness breeds. I can restore harmony for a price. Price, of course. Always a price. But desperation loosens even the tightest purse strings. You watch as the first patient, a woman whose husband died last month, sits before him. He presses her wrist, hums softly, then announces, "Too much black bile." He slices her forearm and lets the blood drip into the brass cup. She winces but doesn't protest. When it's done, he pours her a spoonful of bitter tonic. "You'll feel weak tonight," he says, "but better by morning." You return home uneasy. Your wife shakes her head when you tell her. "He's no healer," she says flatly. "He's a vulture." She's probably right. Still, when your youngest starts coughing 2 days later, you find yourself standing in line before Master Odo anyway. He listens to the child's chest, frowns, and nods gravely. "The humors are stagnant," he mutters. "We must draw them out." He reaches for his leeches, fat, glistening things that writhe in a clay jar. He places 2 on the boy's neck. You have to look away. When it's over, your son's face is pale but breathing easier. Maybe it's working, you tell yourself. Maybe the man knows what he's doing. But the next morning, the boy is just as sick. And Odo is gone, vanished in the night, leaving only muddy footprints and a few coins missing from your table. Historians still argue whether medieval medicine did more harm than good. Leeches, purges, mercury tonics, charms, they may have soothed the mind, but rarely the body. Still, belief itself was medicine of a kind. In a world so chaotic, a little order, even imagined, could mean survival. Not all healers are frauds, though. You've heard of the wise woman who lives near the forest's edge, a widow who knows the language of plants. People whisper that she can cure fevers with willow bark, mend wounds with honey, even calm nightmares with lavender smoke. Some say she talks to spirits. Others say the church would burn her if they dared. You find her one dusk, her small cottage glowing orange from within. The air smells of sage and earth. When she opens the door, her eyes are sharp, curious. You explain your son's illness. She listens without interrupting, then nods. He's not dying, she says. He's tired. The air here is wrong. Too damp. She hands you a bundle of herbs tied with twine. Hang these near his bed. Boil the rest and make him drink the water. You thank her, though part of you wonders if it's witchcraft. She laughs softly, as if reading your thoughts. Witchcraft is what people call what they don't understand. Go now. The boy needs rest. You do as she says. That night, your son finally sleeps through till dawn. You wake to the sound of his soft breathing and feel something you haven't felt in months. Relief. Still, you don't tell anyone where you've been. The church has ears everywhere. And lately, whispers about her have grown louder. A week later, soldiers arrive from the abbey, accusing her of sorcery. They say she conversed with the devil and tempted souls from the light. You know it's a lie, but you say nothing as they drag her away. You don't even open your door. You just hold your son close and pray they never come for you. The next morning, the air smells faintly of ash. They burned her at the edge of the forest. You walk there after sunset when no one's watching. The ground is still warm. A few blackened herbs cling to the soil, their scent strangely sweet. You kneel, close your eyes, and whisper a thank you to the wind. Medicine, you realize, isn't always about science. It's about hope. The thin thread that keeps you moving when reason says stop. When you return home, your wife asks what's wrong. You shake your head. Nothing, you say, though your throat feels tight. She gives you a knowing look but doesn't press. Some truths are safer unspoken. As the months pass, the village begins to breathe again. The church holds a mass of thanksgiving. The fields are sown anew. People laugh cautiously, as if afraid to tempt fate. The plague, the quacks, the burnings, all of it begins to fade into story. But you remember, sometimes, when your son runs through the fields, healthy and laughing, you smell sage on the wind and think of the woman who saved him. You wonder if she knew she'd die for her kindness, and whether she'd do it again anyway. Historians still argue whether medieval faith and medicine were enemies or twins, each clinging to mystery to make sense of pain. But you know the truth. Both were just different prayers to the same indifferent sky. You look up at that sky now, wide and pale, and feel something like peace. The world is cruel, yes, but every now and then, it surprises you with mercy. As the day drew its final breath, the castle settled into a hush that felt older than stone itself. The sky blushed with the faintest pink, then melted into deep indigo. Shadows stretched long over the courtyard, twisting through arches and along cold flagstones worn smooth by centuries of feet. Somewhere in the great hall, a servant extinguished the last of the rushlights, their faint smoke curling upward like whispers vanishing into memory. Outside, the wind stirred the banners that hung from the ramparts, carrying with it the scent of rain and hearth smoke from the village below. The castle, so lively at dawn with the shuffle of guards and chatter of kitchens, now exhaled slowly, heavily, as if even its stones were weary from holding the weight of so many years. Inside the keep, torches flickered along the narrow corridors. The light pooled across suits of armor that gleamed faintly, their visors closed tight, frozen in perpetual watch. The air was cool, touched by the faint tang of iron and wax. A single servant, an old man with bent shoulders, made his way through the passage with a small oil lamp. He paused before a doorway, adjusting the wick. The door creaked softly, revealing a small chamber with tapestries that told stories no one remembered clearly anymore. Tales of battles long finished, of kings whose bones had turned to dust beneath the chapel floor. He placed the lamp on the table beside a simple wooden chest, then turned toward the narrow window. Outside, twilight deepened, and a low mist began to gather around the moat. It clung to the water, pale and ghost-like, as though the castle floated upon a dream. The servant stood there for a moment, breathing in the stillness. He had done this every night for as long as he could recall, though he no longer remembered when the habit had started or why. Below in the courtyard, the blacksmith's hammer fell silent. The kitchen fires dwindled to embers. Somewhere, a lone hound barked once, then curled into its straw bed. The castle's heartbeat slowed. In the great tower, the steward finished his ledger by candlelight, recording how many sacks of barley remained, how much wax was left for the coming winter, and which tenants owed their taxes in hens rather than coins. He wrote slowly, methodically, though his eyes drifted often to the window and the fading light beyond it. It was in moments like this that the castle felt alive, not as a fortress of men, but as a being with its own quiet pulse. Every beam, every brick, every whisper in the corridor was part of a long, endless conversation with time itself. The creak of a door, the echo of boots on the stair, the sigh of wind beneath the battlements. All spoke of the countless lives that had passed through its walls. In the chapel, a single candle still burned before the altar. The wax had melted into strange shapes, like rivers on a map. The priest knelt in silence, his lips moving in a prayer that had not changed in 200 years. The sound of the words, soft, measured, echoed faintly off the cold stone. Above him, the stained glass windows glowed faintly from the last traces of day. Blues, reds, and golds shimmered against the walls, casting halos that flickered as the candle's flame trembled. He paused, listening. From far off, perhaps from the watchtower, came the faint clang of a bell, 8 times. The hour of rest. The priest crossed himself and rose. He snuffed out the candle with a breath. Darkness swallowed the chapel. Outside, the courtyard was now veiled in full night. The moon hung above the ramparts, pale and distant, casting the towers in silver. The moat reflected its light like a mirror. Somewhere along the walls, a guard shifted his spear and stamped his feet against the chill. From this height, the land stretched endlessly, fields sleeping beneath frost, the faint orange glow of distant cottages, and beyond that, the forest, deep, unbroken, ancient. For travelers passing on the road below, the castle looked almost unreal, its silhouette rising against the stars like something pulled from a forgotten age. They might imagine the lives within, the feasts, the hunts, the whispered intrigues in candlelit chambers. Yet tonight all was still. The castle kept its secrets, just as it always had. Inside, in one of the upper chambers, a young page lingered by the window. He had been told to sleep hours ago, but curiosity had its own pull. He watched the moonlight ripple across the armor in the hall, across the old flags that stirred gently above the courtyard. Somewhere beyond the hills, thunder rumbled, soft, low, promising rain. The boy pressed his forehead to the glass. He thought of the stories told by the older men, that on certain nights, when the mist rose thick and the bells rang late, the spirits of the old lords walked the ramparts again, gazing out over their lands as they once had in life. He waited, but the ramparts remained empty. Only the wind moved. At last, he turned from the window and crawled beneath his blanket. The castle murmured faintly around him, stone shifting with the night's chill, timbers creaking, rain beginning to tap gently against the shutters. As his eyes drifted shut, it was easy to imagine that the walls themselves were breathing, whispering lullabies older than memory. Down in the courtyard, the torches guttered and went out one by one, until only the watchtower remained lit. The sound of the bell faded into silence. The world was hushed, and in that silence, the castle dreamed. It dreamed of the days when banners fluttered bright in the sun, when laughter filled the hall, when hoofs clattered across the drawbridge and trumpets called the knights to ride. It dreamed of faces long gone, of feasts, of songs, of smoke curling from the hearth on cold winter mornings. It dreamed of the weight of time, and how, no matter how many ages might pass, the stones would remember everything. Beyond the walls, the rain fell steady now, washing over the battlements, the towers, the moss-covered gate. It ran in silver rivulets along the carvings and gargoyles, tracing every mark that centuries had left. The castle stood unyielding beneath the storm, yet peaceful, as if the rain were not an assault, but a benediction. In the great hall, darkness thickened. The last ember in the hearth winked out. The sound of rain became the only voice, And for those who slept within, the boy, the priest, the old servant. The dreams came easily, gently, carried on the rhythm of the rain and the deep, patient heartbeat of the stone. The first drop struck the water like a whisper, then another, and another. Within moments, the calm surface of the moat rippled and danced, alive with silver rings that spread outward, colliding and merging in soft percussion. The night had deepened into that strange hour when time itself seems to hold its breath, somewhere between midnight and memory. High above, thunder grumbled again, rolling low and heavy across the hills. The clouds gathered thick and bruised, swallowing what little moonlight remained. Wind curled through the trees beyond the walls, bending branches and scattering leaves that skittered across the drawbridge like frightened mice. Inside the castle, shutters rattled. The old timbers groaned as the storm pressed against them, testing their centuries of strength. A tapestry flapped loose in the corridor, its edge slapping rhythmically against the wall. Somewhere in the distance, a door slammed. In the great hall, the embers in the hearth glowed faintly, their light reflecting in the empty goblets left on the long oak table. Above them, the rafters were black with smoke and age. The smell of rain and wet stone drifted in through the cracks, cool and clean, an ancient perfume that washed away the day's weariness. Then came lightning. A single blinding flash, white as spilled milk, lit the courtyard for a heartbeat. The moat gleamed like a blade. The towers, the gatehouse, the ramparts, all shone stark against the sky, etched in brilliance, before the darkness swallowed them once more. Thunder answered, sharp, immediate, shaking dust from the rafters. The hound beneath the kitchen stairs whimpered softly. The page, still half awake in his small bedchamber, pulled his blanket tighter around his shoulders. He loved storms, though they frightened him. There was something sacred about them, something that made the world seem vast and alive. Each peal of thunder felt like the voice of God calling across the centuries. Each flash of light revealed a glimpse of the unseen. Down by the stables, a lantern swung from its hook. The horses stamped and snorted, uneasy at the noise. An old groom moved between them, murmuring words of calm, his voice lost in the wind. He checked the bolts on the doors, tugged the rope at the hayloft, and whispered a short prayer, the same one his father had whispered before him on storm nights long ago. Outside, the moat swelled under the deluge. The rain ran in rivulets down the stone walls, filling the cracks between the old blocks. The water lapped higher against the drawbridge, where moss grew thick and slippery. Beyond the gate, the forest was nothing but darkness and sound. The hiss of rain, the boom of wind through the branches, and the faint call of an owl braving the storm. In the watchtower, a lone guard held his post. His torch hissed in the damp air, the flame sputtering each time the wind found its way through the arrow slits. He drew his cloak tighter and looked out across the valley. He could see almost nothing now, only the faint reflection of lightning on the water and, far below, the twisting path that led to the village. He thought of the people down there, asleep in their cottages, roofs shuddering under the same sky. Perhaps, he mused, they too listened to the thunder and felt both fear and comfort in its voice. For storms, though fierce, also promised renewal. They washed the world clean. Another flash split the heavens, followed by a crack so loud it seemed the sky itself had been torn open. The guard flinched, then laughed softly to himself. A thin sound swallowed by the wind. He had seen many storms in his years, but still they stirred something primal within him. He leaned against the cold stone parapet and let the rain soak through his hood. In the courtyard below, the rain had turned to a steady torrent. Water cascaded down the steps, pooling around the well. The old servant who had tended the lamps earlier now hurried from doorway to doorway, checking that the torches were extinguished. His lamp flickered wildly, casting erratic shadows that danced like ghosts across the walls. He paused beside the chapel, where the bell rope hung still and heavy. For a moment, he imagined pulling it, one deep toll to call the castle's spirits awake. But he only smiled faintly at the thought and turned away. His boots splashed through shallow puddles as he disappeared into the dark. Lightning again. This time it illuminated the gargoyles perched along the battlements. Stone beasts frozen in eternal snarls, rain running from their mouths like tears. For an instant, they seemed alive, guardians of some ancient secret, watching over all who slept within. Inside the chapel, the wind found its way through a cracked pane of glass, setting the extinguished candle stubs to quiver. The priest, lying in his narrow bed nearby, stirred but did not wake. He dreamed of rivers flooding their banks, of fire and light, of the sky breaking open above a sea of stars. Outside, the storm reached its height. Rain hammered the roof tiles. Thunder rolled from horizon to horizon without pause. The moat boiled with motion. The drawbridge chains rattled and strained. Yet amid the chaos, there was beauty. The rhythm of nature unbound. The reminder that the world still held forces greater than any lord or king. The castle, for all its age and strength, yielded to that power without fear. It had stood through countless tempests, through sieges and winters and the long decay of time. Tonight's storm was but another verse in its long song of endurance. Gradually, the fury began to fade. The thunder rolled farther away, its voice softer now, as though retreating into the mountains. The rain slowed to a patter. The air, moments ago heavy and electric, grew cool and still. The moat settled back into silence, its surface reflecting the dim light from the tower's lone window. The guard, seeing the storm's end, lowered his torch. Below, the page finally drifted into sleep. The groom dozed beside the horses. The servant reached his chamber and set the lamp upon the table, its glow gentle against the damp walls. By dawn, the castle would smell of wet earth and stone, of rain-drenched moss and cooled iron. The world would wake renewed. But for now, the night belonged to the aftermath, the hush that follows thunder, the breath between endings and beginnings. The moat gleamed once more, calm as glass. A single drop fell from the eaves and rippled across its surface. And for those still awake to see it, that simple sound, the kiss of water upon water, felt like the closing line of a very old prayer. Even the fiercest storm must pass, but the memory of its voice stays within the walls, echoing softly, like the sea within a shell. Morning creeps in slow and gray, the kind of dawn that feels half asleep itself. The storm has passed, leaving the world scrubbed raw. Mud glistens, air smells like iron, and the moat reflects a washed-out sky. You blink against the pale light as you step into the courtyard. The stones squish under your boots, slick with last night's rain. Somewhere, a rooster announces the obvious. The world has survived the storm. But you've got to survive the day. And today, justice is being served, or so the villagers claim. Down in the square, a small crowd has gathered. Not a cheerful one, mind you. People clutch their cloaks close, muttering in low voices, all drawn by the same grim magnet. The stocks, 2 wooden frames, darkened with age and rain, stand in the center of the square like props from a morality play. You can smell the damp wood before you even reach them. The air still carries that faint scent of smoke and wet straw. The baker's apprentice is already there, his sleeves rolled, tossing handfuls of spoiled vegetables into a basket with an enthusiasm that makes you uneasy. Got to make them pay somehow, he mutters, not really to you. At first, you don't know who's being punished. Then you see a man and a woman, heads and hands trapped in the rough holes of the stocks. Their faces are blotched red from cold, their hair plastered to their cheeks. The man coughs. The woman flinches. They've been there since dawn. Their crime? Blasphemy, someone whispers. Or maybe gossip. Or maybe they just crossed the wrong steward on the wrong day. In medieval justice, the difference hardly matters. See, the law back then wasn't a system of logic, it was theater. A public show designed to restore order, which really meant reminding everyone who held power. Punishment wasn't about guilt or innocence. It was about spectacle. The crowd had to see that something or someone was being controlled. A monk stands nearby, reading from a scroll. His voice is thin, half lost in the morning air. That others may learn to fear the wages of sin. People nod solemnly, though most aren't really listening. They're watching. They always watch. Children toss bits of mud. Someone laughs. The woman in the stocks squeezes her eyes shut and says nothing. You almost admire her silence. It's defiance in its own small way. The man beside her mutters something under his breath. A prayer or a curse. You can't tell which. The local constable clears his throat, pretending to look important. His leather cap gleams with rainwater. In truth, he's little more than a messenger of the manor lord, part peacekeeper, part bully. You can tell by the way he carries himself, puffed up like a rooster who's forgotten it's still muddy out. The bell rings once from the chapel. It's meant to mark the beginning of daily mass, but here in the square, it feels like a cue. The first vegetable flies through the air and bursts against the man's shoulder with a wet smack. Someone cheers. You glance around. No one seems horrified. This is routine. People treat it like weather, unpleasant but expected. Even children, clutching their mother's skirts, stare with open fascination. It's education in its own twisted way. Historians still argue whether this kind of punishment actually worked. Some say it kept order, that fear of humiliation curbed petty crimes. Others believe it simply hardened the public, turning empathy into sport. Either way, it shaped a world where justice meant pain, and mercy was just another rumor. A cart creaks by, its driver refusing to meet anyone's eyes. You follow it with your gaze and catch sight of another form of punishment nearby. A wooden pillory, this one empty. You imagine what it must feel like. The pressure on your neck, the ache in your back, the hours of waiting, unable to scratch your face or shield your eyes from the sun. The smell of rotten eggs, laughter cutting through your pride. Justice, medieval style, wasn't about comfort. It was about reminding you where you stood. And if the stocks were for humiliation, the gallows were for closure. Everyone in this village knows that too well. Last month, a thief was hanged for stealing a loaf of bread. No one remembers his name. They remember, instead, the way his body swung gently in the wind afterward, a warning painted against the dawn. The woman in the stocks shifts, groaning quietly. Her fingers are white from cold. The man tries to speak again, but the words are lost under the crowd's chatter. A priest approaches, offering them water. No one stops him, but no one helps either. Compassion is rationed like grain. Still, there are moments, tiny cracks in the cruelty. A child tugs on his mother's sleeve and whispers, "Why do they hurt them?" The mother hesitates. You can see the answer forming on her tongue. Because that's how the world works. But she doesn't say it. She just squeezes his hand tighter. As the hours drag on, the crowd thins. Farmers return to their fields, shopkeepers to their stalls. Justice, it seems, has been served. By noon, only the constable remains, drowsing on his stool while the punished hang limp in the stocks. A few crows perch on the rooftops, their cries echoing through the square. Rain threatens again, the clouds gathering in pale sheets over the horizon. You stand there a moment longer, watching the light shift across the faces of the condemned. And something inside you stirs. A faint unease, maybe guilt. You're part of the system too. Everyone is. This isn't just a story of cruelty. It's a story of survival, of communities clinging to control in a world where fate itself feels unpredictable. Because when the harvest fails, when plague creeps in, when storms wash away your fields and your hope, you need to believe someone can restore balance. Even if that means cheering while your neighbor suffers. The woman opens her eyes once more. For the first time, she looks straight ahead, past the crowd, past the constable, maybe even past you. Her gaze is calm, almost pitying, the kind of look that says she understands the world too well to fear it anymore. The constable stirs, yawns, and calls the hour. It's time. The prisoners are freed. Their wrists tremble as they pull free from the wooden frame. They don't thank anyone. They just walk, slow and steady, into the mist that's beginning to rise from the wet ground. You watch them go until they disappear behind the chapel. Somewhere, the bell rings again. This time softer, gentler, as though even it has grown tired of pretending justice ever meant peace. And as you turn back toward the castle, you can't help but wonder. If fear keeps the peace, what keeps the fear? You climb the hill back toward the castle, boots squelching through the soaked grass. The air tastes of metal and rain, and every step seems to pull you closer to something older than the storm itself. Authority made of stone. From a distance, the walls look calm, almost noble, but up close you can see the truth. The place breathes intimidation. The gatehouse looms ahead, dark archway yawning wide. Guards in chainmail stand like statues, faces hidden beneath dripping hoods. You nod as you pass, though neither man returns it. Inside the courtyard, puddles reflect the gray sky. Servants hurry about, sweeping mud, hauling buckets, pretending they don't notice the stink of fear that always lingers after public punishment. You've felt it before, that weight pressing down on your chest. The castle doesn't merely rule this valley. It owns the air. Every law, every coin, every grain of wheat bends its knee here first. A falconer crosses your path, the bird's hood drawn tight. The raptor shifts, feathers rustling, sensing tension even its master ignores. Nearby, a boy empties the night soil cart into a trench behind the kitchens. Steam rises where waste meets rainwater, a bitter reminder that grandeur is built on someone else's labor. Inside, the main hall glitters with candlelight. A tapestry of battle stretches across the far wall. Knights on horseback trampling nameless enemies. The Lord himself sits at the high table, draped in velvet the color of dried blood. He doesn't see you, not really. His gaze sweeps past, fixed on something only power can perceive. Itself. A servant whispers near the dais, head bowed. You catch a fragment, talk of taxes due, of a farmer's complaint, of fines for tardy harvests. The Lord waves a jeweled hand, dismissing it all. Tell them, he murmurs, that loyalty is measured in coin. So much for mercy. You keep walking, eyes down. The rushes on the floor squish beneath your boots. The smell of roasting meat drifts from the kitchens. Fat crackling, herbs sizzling. Nobles laugh nearby, cups clinking, their laughter sharp as cut glass. It's a strange contrast. Feasting within walls that echo with the memory of hunger just beyond. Historians still argue whether medieval nobles truly believed they were chosen by God or simply acted as though they were. The difference, of course, hardly mattered to those who starved outside their gates. You pause beside a window slit. Outside, the valley spreads below. Tiny figures moving through mist, smoke curling from chimneys. The people look peaceful from up here, like ants that don't know they're watched. Maybe that's how the Lord prefers it. The castle's view is a God's eye one, and from such height, empathy shrinks. Behind you, a minstrel begins to play. The lute's notes are soft, melancholy, echoing through the rafters. He sings of loyalty and glory, of knights defending honor, of the land's great protector seated above them all. The irony isn't lost on you. Even the songs here bend their knees to hierarchy. The melody lingers as you make your way to the kitchens, drawn by warmth. Here, life feels more human. Cooks shout over bubbling pots, dogs scavenge for scraps, and someone hums under their breath. The air is thick with smoke and sweat and something close to laughter. This, you realize, is where the real heart of the castle beats. Not in the hall of velvet and pride, but here, among those who keep the fire alive. A scullery maid passes you a crust of bread. You look like you need it, she says, grinning. You take it with a nod. For a moment, the day feels lighter. You joke about surviving both storms and lords. She laughs, eyes bright, and mutters, "Storms are kinder." There's truth in her tone that no historian could improve. As evening gathers, the castle changes. Servants light torches along the walls, their flames flickering in the damp air. The halls glow gold and amber. Shadows stretch long, merging into corners, forming shapes that look almost alive. The feast resumes upstairs. Music louder now, laughter slurred with wine. You find yourself drifting through corridors lined with portraits. Painted eyes follow you. Kings, queens, ancestors, each face frozen in smug permanence. Some have been dead for centuries, yet here they are, still watching, still judging. Their smiles are thin, their eyes eternal. You wonder how many lives were traded for each frame. A servant passes, carrying a silver platter. Another follows with jugs of ale. The smell of spilled drink trails behind them, sweet and heavy. Somewhere beyond, you hear a sharp cry. Someone scolded, maybe struck. It fades quickly, replaced by polite laughter. Power doesn't shout. It whispers, then smiles. In a side chamber, you notice the steward counting coins by candlelight. He moves them like a priest moving prayer beads, each coin a small absolution. He doesn't look up when you enter. The rhythm of wealth is holy work. The Lord may command the land, but it's men like this who feed its hunger. Historians still debate whether medieval economics were acts of faith or fear. Perhaps both. Gold was stability in a world of famine, plague, and unpredictable gods. To hold it was to feel safe for a moment longer. You step outside again. Night has settled, soft but restless. The moon hides behind thin clouds, and the air hums with the echo of distant revelry. From the highest tower, torchlight flickers, a signal, perhaps, or just vanity. Down below, near the outer wall, servants gather around a small fire, sharing stories in low voices. You wander closer, drawn by their laughter. One man tells a tale of a ghost that haunts the Lord's treasury, a miserly spirit who counts coins all night, unable to rest. The others chuckle, shaking their heads. If that's true, one woman says, then no ghost will ever leave this place. You smile. You believe her. The fire pops, sending sparks into the dark. For a heartbeat, they resemble stars. You watch them fade, and something within you settles. This, too, is the castle, the part unseen from the banners or the battlements. The warmth shared quietly, the humanity flickering under oppression. A bell tolls from above, deep and slow, marking the late hour. Servants rise, dusting off their clothes. Back to the shadows, someone jokes. The fire's last ember glows, then dies. The courtyard grows quiet. You look up once more at the towers silhouetted against the cloudy sky. The castle stands silent, vast, indifferent. But in that indifference lies the strange comfort of continuity. The same stones that witnessed cruelty also sheltered laughter. The same halls that echoed commands also held lullabies. You turn toward your chamber, steps echoing softly in the corridor. The air smells faintly of smoke and bread and candle wax. Familiar, almost soothing. You know that tomorrow, life will continue under the same shadow. But for tonight, at least, the walls are quiet. And as you lie down, the thought drifts through your mind. Maybe history isn't just built by those in power, but by those who manage to dream beneath it. You wake before dawn, your body aching from the straw mattress that's long since given up on comfort. Outside, the world is tinted silver with frost. You can see your breath, and even your blanket feels like paper armor against the cold. Winter has arrived in full force, and unlike in the cozy pictures of ye olde Christmas, this season isn't filled with feasts and laughter. It's a months-long trial of endurance. You rise because you have to, not because you want to. The livestock need tending, the fire needs feeding, and the morning chores can't be put off for warmth's sake. The first sound you hear is coughing. Everyone's coughing. The smoky air inside the house, trapped by shuttered windows and damp wood, clings to the lungs. There's no such thing as fresh air. Even the straw on the floor smells faintly of mold. You stretch your legs, crack your back, and light the hearth, watching the flames struggle before catching. The moment it does, there's a brief flicker of relief. You've beaten the darkness again. For now. You glance at the family's food stores, and the sight makes your stomach tighten. A few onions, some barley, a sack of turnips starting to rot. If you're lucky, there's a wheel of cheese wrapped in cloth and guarded like treasure. Meat is a luxury reserved for the few, and fish, though abundant in theory, are harder to catch when the rivers are half frozen. People in winter prayed for Lent to come quickly. It meant fewer expectations of meat, more excuses to make do with gruel. The days blur together in a pale, smoky haze. You patch your boots with old leather scraps, melt snow for water, and check the roof for leaks. The thatch drips steadily when the snow above melts, and you plug the holes with moss and straw, muttering that it'll have to do. There's no concept of hygge, no romantic fireplace glow, just smoke, damp, and the gnawing sense that one bad week could end it all. Outside, the village seems half asleep. The blacksmith's forge is silent, the mill frozen. Even gossip slows down this time of year. The old folks huddle by the fire, muttering prayers for spring. Children chase each other indoors, too cold to go outside for long. Every morning feels the same. The brittle crunch of frost underfoot, the gray horizon, and the long wait for the sun to rise higher. You remember last winter, when the food ran out in February and you boiled bark to stretch the soup. When someone's cow died and the entire village secretly thanked the misfortune. Because it meant meat, even if only for a day or two. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants were resilient or simply resigned. But either way, they survived by refusing to give up on routine. You did what needed to be done because the alternative was worse. As the day stretches on, you find yourself at the communal oven. It's one of the few places that feels alive in winter. The smell of baking bread, dense, dark loaves made from rye and whatever filler grain is available, draws people in. You swap gossip while waiting your turn. Someone mentions a rumor of wolves near the woods. Someone else talks about the Lord raising taxes again. You laugh not because it's funny, but because laughter feels like defiance. At night, when the light fades too early and the fire burns low, the mind starts playing tricks. You listen to the wind outside and imagine it's whispering through the trees, carrying ghosts or spirits. The superstitions feel closer in winter, like the darkness presses against the walls, testing for cracks. People leave bits of bread for the house spirits, or mutter charms before bed. Rational thought gives way to the quiet dread that maybe, just maybe, the dark really does watch back. You wrap yourself tighter in the blanket, trying to find warmth in your own breath. The world beyond your cottage feels distant, unreachable. Every sound outside, a creaking door, a shifting tree branch, feels amplified. You wonder how anyone could ever find this romantic. The medieval winter isn't cozy. It's a test of patience, faith, and sheer willpower. And still, you can't help but find a strange beauty in the stillness. The stars are sharper, the silence deeper. There's a sense that the earth itself is asleep, waiting for you to endure until it wakes again. By late February, you start to notice the first hints of change. The days grow longer by a few heartbeats. The snow melts in patches, revealing soggy ground beneath. You almost cry when you spot a single green sprout pushing through the mud. You know it's too early, it'll probably die in the next frost, but it doesn't matter. Hope, fragile as it is, feels like sunlight on your face. Winter doesn't end all at once. It drags, reluctant, like a tired beast. But eventually the chill softens. The air smells different. Birds return. And when the first true thaw comes, you step outside and stretch like someone waking from a long, grim dream. You've made it. Somehow. Again. You smile at the absurdity of it all. You think about how people centuries from now will romanticize this life. Imagine it as simple and pure. You'd laugh if your teeth weren't chattering. The first warmth of spring feels like a trick. You don't trust it. After months of gray skies and frozen mornings, a patch of blue overhead feels almost suspicious. You step outside, breathe in, and for the first time in what feels like forever, the air doesn't bite. The fields still look half dead. Muddy, uneven, littered with the ghosts of last year's crops. But you can sense life underneath, waiting. You roll your shoulders, feeling a strange mixture of relief and exhaustion. You've survived another winter, and that means only one thing. It's time to work even harder. Spring in the medieval world isn't a celebration. It's an alarm clock. The moment the frost retreats, the race begins. You grab your wooden spade, check the plowshare for rust, and head out to the fields. The soil is cold and clumpy, but it's life itself. You kneel, crumble it in your hands, and feel that earthy smell, the scent of survival. This is where the year begins, where the village's fate for the next 12 months is decided. Every seed you plant carries a prayer with it. You're not alone, of course. Everyone's out there. Men, women, children, even the elderly who can barely stand but refuse to sit idle. The rhythm of the village shifts from hibernation to feverish motion. The cows are led to pasture, the oxen yoked, the carts repaired. There's shouting, laughter, even the occasional argument about which patch of land belongs to whom. The noise feels good. It means life is moving again. You look at the horizon, where the manor's roof glints faintly. The Lord's men are already inspecting the fields, making sure the peasants are doing their part. You nod politely when one rides by, pretending not to notice the smugness in his tone. He doesn't know what it's like to freeze half the year, to pray for seed not eaten by rats, to work yourself raw so he can dine on bread you'll never taste. You bite your tongue. You need his land, even if it breaks you. The plowing begins. The creak of wood, the grunt of oxen, the dull thud of earth turning. It's a rough, almost hypnotic music. You fall into the rhythm quickly, your body remembering what to do even if your muscles protest. Sweat runs down your back despite the chill air. The soil gives you resistance, but you welcome it. There's something deeply human about this fight with the land, this endless cycle of take and give. By midday, your hands are blistered and your knees ache, but there's satisfaction in it. You pause to drink from a wooden cup, the water cool and metallic. Someone nearby cracks a joke about last year's poor harvest, and you all laugh. Not because it's funny, but because laughter makes the work lighter. Humor, in the medieval world, is a survival tool. A single shared joke is worth more than a meal some days. As you work, your mind drifts. You think about the saints and their feast days, the rhythm of faith that underpins every week. There's a comfort in knowing when to fast, when to feast, when to pray for rain. Historians still argue whether religion was a prison or a lifeline, but to you, it's simply the air you breathe. You don't question it any more than you question the sunrise. The church bell rings in the distance, and you pause instinctively, crossing yourself before resuming your work. Evenings are quieter now. The sun lingers longer. The air softens. Families gather outside again, sitting on low stools, sharing bread and weak ale. The talk is small, about seeds, about neighbors, about the weather, but it feels monumental after months of silence. You watch children chase each other near the fields, their laughter echoing like a promise. Somewhere nearby, a woman hums an old tune about spring's return. You don't remember all the words, but the melody is enough. Life feels fragile in spring. One wrong frost, 1 week of bad rain, and everything could collapse. You sleep lightly, listening for storms. You wake before sunrise to check the seedlings, muttering encouragement like they can hear you. There's a nervous energy in the village, half hope, half fear. You all depend on the same thing, the mercy of weather. And weather, as everyone knows, has no mercy. But there are good days too. Days when the sun warms your back, when the air smells of wet grass, when the first flowers bloom near the cottage door. You find yourself smiling for no reason. You even catch the miller whistling, a rare sound in any season. You think about how every generation before you must have felt this same cautious joy, the relief of life returning, mixed with the quiet dread of knowing how easily it can vanish again. In the evenings, as the sky turns gold and pink, you sit by the door and watch the fields stretch out like a patchwork quilt. You can't help but feel proud. The same land that nearly killed you in winter now promises to keep you alive. You lean back, close your eyes, and for a brief moment, let yourself dream of an easier life. Maybe next year will be kinder. Maybe your children won't have to work quite so hard. Maybe, just maybe, history won't repeat itself in this endless loop of toil and hunger. A soft breeze rustles the thatch above you. Somewhere an owl calls. The sound feels ancient, eternal. You realize that your life, muddy, hard, and brief as it may be, is part of something vast and unbroken. The same seasons, the same struggles, the same small joys have been repeating for centuries. You are a thread in that pattern, fragile but essential. And though the world feels cruel, it's also breathtaking in its stubbornness to keep going. You smile again, faintly. Tomorrow will be another long day. The soil waits, the sun rises, and you'll keep moving, just as those before you did. By midsummer, the air has changed again. It's thick, heavy, and humming with life. The fields that once looked like patches of mud are now a sea of green. You walk between rows of barley, their stalks tall enough to brush your fingertips, and you feel a flicker of cautious pride. This stretch of trembling gold is what the last 9 months have been for. Every blister, every night of hunger, every prayer whispered to saints and stars alike. They all lead to this. The work doesn't stop, of course. It never does. You wake to the smell of dew and manure, your body sore in familiar places. The sun rises early, blazing long before you're ready for it. Sweat gathers at your collar before the first hour's done. You squint across the horizon and see the shimmer of heat above the fields. You think about rain, how much you need it, how much you fear it. Too little and the crops wither. Too much and they rot. The sky decides your fate with the indifference of a coin toss. By mid-morning, the air hums with insects. Flies, bees, gnats. They all find you, no matter where you go. You swat them away with your sleeve, muttering under your breath. It's a small thing, but irritation is a constant companion here. You've learned that medieval life is a lesson in patience. The patience to wait for bread to rise, for rain to fall, for wounds to heal, and above all, the patience to endure discomfort. There's a strange rhythm to the village in summer. The days are long enough to feel eternal, but each one blends into the next. You mark time not by dates, but by the growth of the crops and the aching of your back. The air smells of hay and river water. Chickens scatter near the road. Children chase each other barefoot, their laughter mixing with the clatter of cart wheels and distant church bells. You think about food more often now, not because you're starving, but because you're surrounded by its promise. The gardens bloom with leeks, beans, and cabbage. There's even fruit, though most of it's sour. You take what you can, sometimes sneaking a plum before it's ripe, wincing at the taste. The hunger never truly goes away. It just changes shape. At night, the village comes alive in a different way. Fires crackle in the open air. Ale flows freely, and stories stretch longer than the stars overhead. Someone tells a tale about the ghost that guards the mill. Another swears he saw a fairy in the marsh. You listen, half amused, half believing. Historians still argue whether medieval people truly believed in magic or simply used it as a way to make sense of chaos. But you know it's both. When so much of your life is out of your hands, belief becomes a form of control. One night, the sky turns wild. The wind rises, the clouds boil, and you hear thunder rolling from miles away. You hurry to cover what you can, the tools, the sacks of grain, and run inside just as the first drops fall. The storm hits hard, drumming against the thatch, rattling shutters. You sit in the dark, clutching your knees, counting seconds between lightning and thunder. You think of your fields, your fragile green hopes out there in the rain. Every crash of thunder feels like a threat. You whisper a prayer. When morning comes, you rush outside and see the damage. Some plants flattened, others washed away. You kneel, muddy to the elbows, and start to lift what you can. It's not hopeless, not yet, but it's close. You feel that familiar mix of fury and resignation. You curse under your breath, then laugh bitterly. It's almost funny how nature never seems to get tired of testing you. Still, there are moments of beauty even in loss. The sky after the storm is impossibly clear. The air smells like wet soil and renewal. The sun returns, tentative but bright, and for a few hours, everything sparkles. You breathe in deeply and remind yourself that this, too, is part of the cycle. The land gives and takes in equal measure, and you're just along for the ride. As summer deepens, life in the village reaches its most vibrant point. Weddings happen now when the weather is kind and the food is plenty. The church bells ring for hours. You dance awkwardly in a circle with everyone else, laughing when you stumble, clutching your mug of ale like treasure. Someone plays a fiddle, someone else claps along, and for a brief, shining moment, the world feels almost kind. Later that night, lying in the grass, you watch the stars. They're brighter than you remember. So many of them that it's hard to believe they all fit in one sky. You trace the constellations the priest once mentioned during Mass and wonder what they really are. Souls? Fires? Holes in the firmament where heaven leaks through? No one knows. But it feels comforting to imagine that the same stars watched over everyone before you, and will keep watching long after you're gone. The days grow hotter. Work slows a little, replaced by waiting. Waiting for the harvest, for the next turn in the wheel. The air hums with a quiet expectation. You know the hardest part is still ahead. The long, back-breaking rush to bring it all in before the weather turns again. But for now, you allow yourself this pause. You sit on the edge of the field, legs covered in dust, and watch the light fade across the barley. You can almost feel time itself breathing, slow and patient. You smile, tired but content. The world, brutal as it is, keeps spinning, and you, somehow, are still here to see it. Harvest begins with the first sharp scent of ripened grain. It's a smell you never forget, sweet, dry, and alive with dust and sunlight. You wake before dawn to the sound of sickles being sharpened, their metal edges rasping like whispers of promise and pain. Every able hand is needed now. Men, women, even children barely old enough to carry a bundle. The fields you've watched for months stand tall, golden, and ready. You look across the expanse and realize how fragile it all is. One bad storm, one spark of fire, and everything you've built could vanish. So, you move quickly, carefully, reverently. You grab your sickle and start cutting. The rhythm takes over almost immediately. Bend, slice, gather, tie, repeat. It's hypnotic, even peaceful, until your back starts to ache and your hands blister anew. Sweat drips from your brow, but you don't stop. The grain must come in before the weather changes. There's no room for delay, no safety net if you fail. The Lord will take his share first, as always, and the church will claim its tithe. Whatever remains, that's what stands between your family and starvation. By mid-morning, the field is alive with motion. Voices shout, scythes flash, birds will overhead hoping for stray seeds. The air is full of laughter, songs, and the hum of work. Someone starts a rough tune, one of those simple harvest songs that everyone knows without remembering where they learned it. You hum along, the melody syncing with your heartbeat. It's strange how community feels strongest when everyone is most exhausted. You can't survive this world alone, and deep down, you know that. Around noon, the sun blazes overhead, turning everything into a haze of gold and heat. You stop for water, wiping your mouth with a dusty sleeve. Someone passes around bread, hard as a board but satisfying all the same. There's talk of good omens, of fat grains and mild weather, of no locusts this year. You try to believe it. You've learned not to tempt fate by celebrating too early. You think about how this season, this exact work, has repeated for countless generations. Historians still argue whether peasants ever felt true happiness. But as you glance around at the faces of those who labor beside you, sweaty, grimy, tired yet smiling, you think yes, maybe not happiness as the scholars mean it, but something quieter, sturdier. The satisfaction of surviving another cycle, of holding in your hands the proof that you've beaten hunger, at least for now. The harvest lasts for weeks. Each day starts earlier and ends later, until you lose track of time entirely. When the last sheaf is tied, when the last cart creaks toward the granary, the whole village exhales. You stand on the edge of the field, staring at the stubble that remains, and feel both proud and hollow. The land looks stripped, bare, but beautiful in its way. You've taken what it gave, and soon you'll give back, through sweat, through care, through faith. The harvest festival follows soon after. It's not lavish, but it feels enormous after the long grind of labor. There's ale, laughter, and dancing. Someone roasts a pig, rare and glorious. Children run barefoot under lanterns. You sit near the fire, legs stretched, and let the sound of joy wash over you. For one night, no one talks about taxes, weather, or sickness. For one night, everyone is full, warm, and alive. Later, as the fire burns low, the talk turns softer. Someone wonders aloud how many harvests they have left in them. Another swears this one was the hardest yet. You smile faintly, staring at the embers. You don't have an answer, but you know the truth, that every generation thinks the same thing, and yet the world keeps turning. When the last songs fade, you wander home through the cool night. The moon is bright, silvering the empty fields. The world feels still, holding its breath. You pause for a moment and look back. This place, harsh and unforgiving as it is, has shaped you. You've cursed it, bled for it, but you also belong to it completely. It's a strange comfort. You whisper a small, half-forgotten prayer, not to any saint in particular, but to the land itself. Thank you, and please, let it all come back again. You sleep soundly that night, for the first time in months. When you wake, the air is already cooler. The wheel is turning again, toward autumn, toward cold, toward another round of endurance. You don't dread it as much this time. Maybe it's the memory of the harvest sun, or maybe you've just learned that life here doesn't allow for much fear. You rise, stretch, and step outside. The fields are quiet, the birds migrating, the morning's crisp. The cycle never ends, and neither do you. You think about the future, about how people centuries from now will look back on your world with curiosity or pity. They'll write about the brutality of medieval life, about the resilience of the peasantry. But they won't really know the texture of it. The rough linen against skin, the sweetness of new bread after famine, the sound of rain on a thatched roof. You wish you could tell them it wasn't just suffering. It was living, in all its muddy, aching glory. And as the sun rises again, painting the horizon gold one more time, you realize something quiet but profound. This world, brutal as it is, keeps teaching you the same lesson. Life hurts, yes, but it also endures. The land rests, the people rebuild, and even after the worst winters, something always grows again. You smile, breath frosting in the morning chill. You pick up your tools, and without a word, you begin again. The fire crackles low now, just embers and warmth. You've walked the fields, seen the seasons turn, felt the hunger, the hope, the endless rhythm of survival. The sounds of medieval life, the rustle of straw, the whisper of prayer, the sigh of the wind through timber, fade slowly into quiet. The year is finished, the cycle complete. You stretch out on your straw bed, the familiar scent of smoke and earth around you. Outside, the world rests. The animals are still, the sky soft and gray. You can almost hear the heartbeat of the land, slow, steady, eternal. You think about the countless lives lived before yours, all of them waking to the same sun, working the same soil, falling asleep to the same lullaby of rain and fire. It's strange, comforting, to realize that time itself is just another harvest, that every life sows something, reaps something, and returns again to quiet. You've seen that brutality and beauty often share the same breath. The world is harsh, yes, but it's also tender in the moments between. So you close your eyes. The wind outside hums through the cracks like a soft voice, lulling you toward rest. The night deepens, calm and timeless. And as your breathing slows, you let go of the world for now, trusting that when dawn comes again, it will find you still here, still part of the great, turning story.